First of all, I would say that there is no great insight in teaching sustainability or strategy. I mean, we are on, fundamentally these courses try and bring in some values that are germane to human beings and which are very important. So the prerequisite, if you ask me, what is the prerequisite for teaching strategy? I think, I'm sorry, sustainability. The first prerequisite would be to have a perspective, to have a point of view. The second prerequisite should be not to be wedded to it. And why do I say this? You need to have a perspective, because unless you have a perspective, you cannot really explain anything. You need to have a reference point. And wherever that is, and one can take multiple points of view on that. Why should you not be wedded to it? You should not be wedded to it because the classroom is a place for experimenting, opening up new thoughts, and you will often be surprised with the kind of insights that students bring in. So if you go in with, this is my perspective, and I'm going to preach to guys about how sustainable management is, how important it is, and so on, it might not be very successful. And of course, more than anything else, you deny yourself the opportunity to learn, and this is really important in this. So I think those are the first two prerequisites, that have a point of view but not be wedded to it. And then the second question that you ask when you're trying to teach sustainability is, what is it that you're trying to teach? I see my kids learning environment, and they learn some very basic things. But they're all very technical, they're very definite kind of things. So there is global warming, and we can have some debate on the impact of global warming, but they will study what global warming is. But when we are teaching students of the kind that we are teaching, there is a lot of room for ambiguity. And therefore, even before we start teaching, we need to really think about what is it that we're trying to teach. Are we trying to teach some facts? I don't think we should try to teach some facts, because at that stage they probably know. But if you want to, then that requires a different method of teaching. Are we trying to form some attitudes and some skills, and they're different. But if you're really trying to change urine and so on at the age of 20, 21, it's I think very difficult. But you can give them some tools and techniques to base their decisions on. So the first thing I go back and I tell my students is, you can't, don't ask me what a good or bad decision is in this field, because there are shades of good and good and good and so on. And so that's not a good question to ask. But whether something is a good decision in sustainability, the good question to ask is, what is the consequence of the decision that I take? There can be good, bad, terrible, horrible consequences to the decisions you take. So it's all about understanding the nature of the trade-off. Knowing that the beast is not very easily described, and if different people describe it, they will describe it very differently, and correctly so. And therefore being open to that element of uncertainty and ambiguity. And this is not an easy thing to manage, because often students would expect you to give a correct answer. They will listen to all of this and they will say, yes, this is the right way, but at the end of the class they will ask you, but what happened? And then of course it requires great control to tell them that, that is not really, what happened really is not the thing. What really matters is how this decision was arrived. So that I think is another important lesson one wants to take away. So whether you are teaching for attitudes or competencies or for knowledge, one must be very clear, because the course needs to be designed accordingly. And each of these will have a different approach to design. The third question I think that really is very important for us in terms of looking at how do we teach sustainability is, what kind of stuff do we have to teach? Today content is very easy to create and access and so on. But you don't really have to pay money to access any of this. If you're creative, you can actually get lots of resources for free. Even if you're not creative, I think there's a really good site called CasePlace.org, which many of you will be familiar with. Really good material is there. But you don't have to do that. You can collect a set of newspaper clippings. You can use that. You can go to YouTube. Practically on every issue you find a video there, particularly controversial issues related to sustainability and so on. And I can show you one if we have time. to kind of just illustrate how one can handle that. So there is a lot of contingent material, which I think earlier was a limitation for many of us from business schools, because you have to pay a lot. But that challenge is now no longer there. I think that's a good thing. But one then needs to go back and look at and search for stuff and so on, which is really good, because if you do that, then you just tend to be very contemporary in your output. And give you a simple example. Here is what I was teaching today, this afternoon. I was talking to a group of Indian Forest Service officers. We had a program going on here, and I was really talking about how the service needs to change. And I use this as a starting point, which is basically the Indian government now requesting that now we take on the sponsorship of the International Olympics. Now, there were a lot of people. There was somebody from Bhopal. You know the background. This is the background. This is the Dow acquired Union Carbide Corporation, which was instrumental in the, whose subsidiary was instrumental in the Bhopal gas accident, and therefore, the activists now feel that Dow should take responsibility. Now, there is no one correct answer to this, but this is really very contemporary. Created a lot of discussion. People start arguing with each other. It just opened up the group, and it allowed them to see multiple perspectives, which is very important in sustainability teaching. There is not one perspective, there are multiple perspectives, and from there on you can number of concepts really come into play. You can look at trade-off, you can look at negotiations, stakeholders, you can look at what frameworks or ethics will you use, and so on. So the whole range of things are possible. A simple newspaper item like this can really bring alive a lot, especially in the classroom. And so one can be very creative in looking at that. You don't necessarily have to look at this, there are multiple ways. But in all, it's very important to understand that this exchange is two-way. I mean, if you ask me, should Dow be punished for this, I don't have an answer. I really don't know the answer. I can say it one way or the other, depending on how strong the argument is. And that's the way I think we should make it in a little bit in a classroom, because you are not, as somebody might put it, you are not a traffic cop to say go this way or that way. You're not a preacher to say this is the right way. You're more like a choreographer. See, why are we there in the classroom? I feel very strongly about some things. But in the classroom, you're basically allowing students to develop perspectives. That's why I said you can't be a preacher in the classroom. Preaching is possible. You can go out and in a different forum you might say that I want to preach. I believe that company should be good. In the classroom, you don't argue that way, because you see, basically look at it this way. There is a law that we say you should not break the law. Beyond that, it's actually moral standards that you set. Now, what the standard that you set will be is very much dependent on the choices that you make. Now, one can say that you have a higher standard or lower standard, but what I would really argue, and I have my preference is the way I argue is if you have a higher standard, then you benefit in the long run. That's the way I argue in the class, because I am biased towards a higher standard. On the other hand, you cannot also ignore the fact that somebody has set the law, and that's minimum that needs to be followed. So after that, if you feel passionate about something, you can bring that passion into the classroom, but you can't influence the decision. There is, but you can do this in other ways. If you want to bring out the tragedy that's Bhopal, there's a really nice BBC video called which happened one night in Bhopal. And my students see it, and you can see it before lunch, and sometimes say lunch, is going to be a disaster after that, because you see that this, the thing. I don't really have to say anything. They can experience it for themselves, and most of them are really young, so they've just heard about Bhopal. They experience it. You can visually bring those things in. But I never tell them, look at this horrible thing, look at this horrible company, and don't you think they should be punished? That's a leading question. If you are, don't you think they should be punished? They will say yes. Sometimes, just for argument's sake, you do that. Because when somebody takes a very strong position in the class, you take exactly the opposite position, and you argue very strongly, just to push them. But at the end of the discussion, you clearly point out that, that extreme position was taken to facilitate this. And I think in sustainability, there is not one truth. And I can give you many, many examples of that. Let me give one example where this actually really comes out very well. And this of course is, something that really happened with GE. GE introduced what is called a portable ultrasound in India. And the problem with it, you can argue one side or the other. You can argue that the portable ultrasound in the northern parts of this country is really a lifesaver for many mothers who are otherwise at risk of being misdiagnosed in the later stages of the pregnancy, not getting adequate health care and so on. You can, on the other side, argue that it's a terrible thing because we know that the girl child is not a preferred child in some parts of India, so you can decide and so on. We have these arguments on either sides. And I think both arguments would be right. There is truth there is truth here. But basically, what kind of due diligence must you do before introducing that product into the market? But I think let me just pick up one point, which is very important, which is basically compare and contrast, the good with the bad, and that's where you see the differences. Success with failures, good examples with bad examples. As we, there are all shapes of different kinds of examples. You can talk about Dow on the one hand, but there are companies that have done exceptionally good work, like in various aspects. So one can use those examples and one must. I just put it up. What I meant was, in teaching sustainability or anything, in this kind of model, you can be a lousy traffic cop and say, stop, start, move this way and so on. You can also take the role of an evangelist and say, I think this must be done and this is the right way to do it and so on. Or you can take the role of an expert consultant and say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these are the solutions and this is the solution the company must improve. Or you can say that I will take all these points of view, I will throw them back at you, I will let you reflect, chew on it, develop your own perspective and decide what is the right thing to do. I tell my students, I always tell my students that I am not here to transform you or change you. I am here to help you think, to give you a framework. After that you want to go and destroy the world, it's your choice. I would rather you don't destroy it, but it's your choice. And I think we should leave it like that because otherwise you can have a lot of debate on where is values learned, and I think values are learned from the needs of your parents, not in this class. This is my perspective because at that point of time they're all well said. But it's our job to kind of look at this. So let me. What kind of challenges can you face when you are teaching sustainability? And I think that's very important to understand. This probably you're all interested in corporate governance and sustainability, and I think there are a lot of similarities between the two. The first challenge that you will suffer is that your students are skeptical. Actually, even before that, the institutions are skeptical in general. And that's the reality. All of us know that. I don't know how many directors think here I can give, but it's generally true that what students value is derivatives and and related stuff. And we have to pander to their requirements. And so sustainability always comes really at the last. That is of course the reality. And as a faculty, I think there was a bigger challenge for us because you can teach sustainability, they will ask, but what else will you teach? And that's okay. What are you really going to teach? Is a question that will happen. I don't know whether you have faced that. I have faced that. And so my suggestion to anybody who wants to teach corporate governance or sustainability is basically you must have a functional basis first. Otherwise, it's very impossible, very difficult to survive. And that I can tell you from my experience. Once again, I had someone who fortunately advised me many years ago on this and said, I think you need to locate yourself in a functional area. This is a business school which is organized on a functional basis. To say I will go and be the sustainability faculty is not very useful because there are 500 faculty, they will not do what want to sustainability. If you are really looking at research and publications, we face that here. I would like to say what are the top 5 journals in sustainability corporate governance. We can put those names, they will not figure in any ABC list of anyone. So then you want to use this to build your career and say I want to apply to an institution, they will say you are published in all not so good journals. See, unfortunately, that is the reality. And we have to live with it. I think all of us face that. But on the other hand, I think having that focus does give you advantage. So I'm essentially saying that there are some risks associated with it, but the flip side of risk is opportunity. And that opportunity is that fewer people, if you do something, it really stands out. Anything that you do is an improvement, and you can actually feel good about what you do, which is very nice. At the end of the day, finally, all promotions and salary and fame aside, you also want to feel that you send out people who have not destroyed the world but have helped make it a better place. I think that, of course, doing a course like this helps. But the first thing that you face is institutional cynicism. Institutions are not so much worried about it. They will do it if there is greater visibility for them as a result of doing this. Get business today to rate schools on sustainability. These schools will tell you, please teach sustainability. So that may be the backward way to, get corporate governance and sustainability up there. Just quickly summarize by saying three of them to all of this. If you want to have a successful, a couple of things. We talked about institutional cynicism. Students, then we need to convince them. The ability to deal with ambiguity is very important. The fact that there is no one correct answer, and you should feel free to tell that I don't know the answer. I mean, can you find out the answer? That's fine in this kind of course. It's not mathematics or finance. Things don't need that. And in sustainability, social responsibility, it need not have. That is not really the idea. And I think the key message should be to actually promote debate. I mean, that basically should be the idea, more than anything else. Because it's not the solutions that you give to the students that are important. I mean, you can do some 20 instances in class, give them 20 solutions. And are you going to go out with these 20 solutions and, basically find all of world's complexities compressed in these 20 different types? Certainly not. So what is required is give them a perspective, a framework to think, a logical way of thinking, and they will find out answers themselves. Very often you will find new problems emerge, and then they will still be able to use this process to find solutions. And that is the way it should be. Okay, let me just, I think we can stop here, but basically, I think the other thing, we talked about integrating and so on, that I'm not sure how much is possible, but one possibility is we can get other faculty to collaborate with you. And not actually in teaching, but in creating material. That is really easy. Because it's a win-win solution for everybody. You could talk to the finance person or the economics person or the strategy or marketing, whichever. And then jointly develop material, which they might use, they might not use, but certainly to improve your own understanding and to improve certainly your output. That kind of collaboration is possible with faculty, with students, and maybe with multiple agencies. That is basically the thing. The other way to bring some of this into the classroom is actually to invite people. You want to bring in, an evangelist point of view, get an evangelist. That really helps. Get Sunita Narayan, and she will just go hammer and tongs at what should be right, Vandana Shiva and so on, and that will be fine. If you want to get, the other perspective, then get somebody else from the industry. If you can put them in the same room, if you have strong arms, can do it. Prevent them from fighting, but that's the way to bring that in. I mean, you should not be, overly biased from one position or the other, no matter what your personal preferences are. That is just my perspective of teaching sustainability. I'm sure that it can be improved, and I'm sure you have some more ideas.